And just how accurate were they in copying the Old Testament books? Up until about 65 years ago, the oldest manuscripts of the Old Testament came from around 1000 AD. These were called the Masoretic texts. They were the product of a group of Jewish scholars known as the Masoretes. They took on the responsibility to ensure that the books of the Old Testament were preserved for future generations. But how accurate was the Masoretic text? Many scholars suspected many errors had occurred in the copying process. Many people believed them until one day in 1947, a boy threw a rock into a cave.
That rock struck pottery, about 37 jars from the testimony of that particular Bedouin shepherd. And in those jars were scrolls made of parchment. On the scrolls were written copies of the Bible. Every book of the Old Testament, except for the book of Esther, was represented among those scrolls. And then also other documents, sectarian documents, but many of these were commentaries on the Bible, so included biblical text as well. What is interesting is that from one of those caves, and there were 11 caves numbered in the order of their discovery, from cave 1 came copies of the book of Isaiah. In fact, a complete copy of Isaiah, the longest book in the Old Testament, 66 chapters, the best to compare perhaps with the Masoretic text to determine how well the text had been transmitted. And in that text, we realized that 95% of that text aligned with or agreed with the Masoretic text, written over 1,000 years later. So we saw in that text the accuracy of transmission by those Hebrew scribes over that long period of time.
The Dead Sea Scrolls have been called the most important biblical archaeological find in history. While they are called scrolls, what they mostly consist of is 19,000 fragments. Putting them back together would require some of the most sophisticated science available.
Well, Dr. Meyer, what I have here is an original biblical Dead Sea Scroll fragment from K4 at Qumran. And what I'm about to show you here, very few people outside of Jerusalem ever get the opportunity to hold, study, examine with their own eyes an original, on sheepskin, biblical Dead Sea Scroll fragment. That's from the book of Daniel. It dates to 125 BC.
Oh, fabulous.
Now remember, as we've taught already, the Dead Sea Scrolls weren't really scrolls. That's a misnomer, because very few complete scrolls were actually found. The great discovery came in over 19,000 pieces that have taken literally 60 years to put back together again into the 800 or so scrolls that we know today. Now, to help understand a little bit about the science and academia of this particular project, here in my hand is a fragment of a Torah scroll from the book of Leviticus. And as you can see, two columns, as you were mentioning before, stitched together. And if we were to be on the reconstruction process, and this is just 350 years old, sheepskin as well, as we were putting the scrolls back together again in Jerusalem, what we would have to do is find where that particular piece went in the text.
What a puzzle, right?
And we would literally put it back together again on where it was supposed to go. There were numerous copies of the exact same scroll. For instance, 36 copies of Psalms. So how were we able to put the scrolls back together again?
Yeah.
3 unique techniques have been the choices there. Handwriting style. Very unique handwriting styles to some of the scribes. And because of infrared technology, we were able to line the piece up where it was supposed to go. Now, Dr. Meyer, here is an example of the technology that was used in Jerusalem in the reconstruction process. Here is how things look to the naked eye. However, when we switch things over to the infrared, look how clear that text becomes.
Fascinating.
But how, because of the duplicate copies, were we able to make sure that piece went into the right spot? Well, remember, just like humans, animals have unique DNA. Therefore, all we had to do to make sure the right piece went into the right spot, we would then DNA test pieces to the north, west, east, and south, and if they all match the same DNA, we knew we put the scrolls back together again. Literally, what's taken over 60 years to perfect and to publish accurate data out of Jerusalem literally has taken that long for only one reason: making sure that we put the project back together again accurately. But this is just a wonderful little piece, and again, a perfect representation of what the Dead Sea Scrolls truly were. 19,000 pieces put back together again into over 800 unique scrolls.
Archaeology actually is a very young discipline. It's only 125 years old, and yet spectacular discoveries are being made.